Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Virtual Galleries Actual Institutions, our final panel in the Museum Without Walls online seminar, and probably our final activity for 2022. Museums Without Walls is an ongoing exploration of virtual art institutions and communities, currently supported by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, Queen's University, Screen Cultures and Curatorial Studies Program, and the Agnes Atherton Art Center. For this stage of the project, Museum Without Walls has been physically hosted at Queen's University in Ontario. And it's worth remembering that, just like many museums across the world, Queen's University is situated on unceded land, ancestral home of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples. This online seminar has been running for 6 weeks now. It was a way for us to extend the program of a conference we had here at Kingston in mid-August. And we had panels and new video presentations every Thursday on many different themes. And I think it's quite exciting that we are wrapping up all these conversations by going back to two very fundamental notions for all this project, which are virtuality and institutions. So today we examine how simulated and immersive environments may be the cornerstone for larger institutional operations, underpinning anything from cultural preservation to providing shared frames of reference and enabling consistent forms of assemblage between actors, both human and non-human. And to explore these questions with us, we have here Lívia Nolasco-Rózsás and Robbie Stethem. I should have checked with you if that's how I pronounce your surnames. And they will be talking about two amazing projects that they are involved in, respectively, Beyond Matter and the Museum of Other Realities. So to briefly introduce our guests before we start, Lívia Nolasco-Rózsás has curated exhibitions at institutions of contemporary and media art worldwide since 2006, including the ZKM, Kronos Art Center, Tallinna Kunsthoeve, Munkzarmuk, Budapest, focusing on the constantly changing media of contemporary art and intersections with various disciplines. She has initiated and developed thematic exhibitions raising questions such as the genealogy and social impact of planetary computation and computer code, electronic surveillance and democracy, and synesthetic perception. As of 2019, she has started research in curatorial studies on the virtual condition and its implication in the exhibition space at the Academy of Fine Arts Leipzig, and as an active head of the Beyond Matter project at ZKM, which he has initiated. And Robbie Stethem is founder and CEO at Museum of Other Realities. His interest in new ways of interacting with information and one another, and has been an industrial designer in a past life. And we'll be starting with presentations by our guests, first Lívia and then Robin, and we'll have some time for discussion and questions in the end. So the floor is yours, Lívia. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much for the invitation. So I will do a presentation, and let me share my screen for that. On the Beyond Matter project, this is a project which is quite complex. So it's based on the collaboration of various partners, and we will not go deep into all the facets of the project because it does have some, and in 20 minutes it's hard to pack them all in. So we just slide through certain slides, but it's important to mention which are the institutions that participate in one or the other layer of the project. First and foremost, the Zentrum, the Center for Art and Media in Karlsruhe, is the project lead, the center of this temporary institution, one could put it that way. And our team at the Zentrum is working in close collaboration with the Centre Pompidou, Paris, On one certain project with the Tallinn Art Hall, on other project, the Tirana Art Lab is also included in different part of this conglomerate, as well as the Ludwig Museum and the Aalto University in Espoo. We also have associated partners and a bunch of funders, supporters, but I wouldn't go deep into this. And the project architecture is quite complex, as you can see, but later we will see that actually the interesting part is somewhere here. I will elaborate more on that. First of all, it's important to mention that we have an online platform. It took us a while to put it together, but on this online platform, there are different planets and they can be moved around and they can be even entered. And each of this planet hides an exhibition created by a resident artist who was resident at one or the other institution I just mentioned, or it is maybe a digital twin of a physical exhibition that we curated as part of the Beyond Matter project, or eventually an online platform that was created for an online exhibition, a curated online exhibition also created as part of this platform. And very soon, as sort of the culmination of the Beyond Matter project, 2 exhibition models are going to be published here as well. Digital models of past landmark exhibitions, one of which took place at the ZKM in 2002, and another one which took place at the Centre Pompidou in Paris in 1985. Here is another slide of the website, but we can skip this. And this is the first exhibition we curated in as part of Beyond Matter. It was a bit of a historical exhibition that tried to explore and try to tackle the question how the digital has changed our notion of space. And it did it with pre- and post-computational artworks, mostly, well, actually from Europe and Latin America. So here you can see a few of them, one by Alicia Quade and another one by Carola Bonfili. And to this exhibition, Spatial Affairs, an online platform was added, or basically it was conceived together with an online platform, which we called Spatial Affairs Wording, a tér világlása, so that referring to the partly Hungarian origin of this work, I mean the collaboration with the Ludwig Museum Budapest. And within this space, you can still visit it. So it's on the already mentioned Beyond Matter online platform. You will find different born digital artworks. And these born digital artworks are not exhibited as images on a wall. As you can see, there are no walls in this exhibition space. So it's a complete deconstruction of the white cube, and it's also a deconstruction of, one could say, modernist exhibition visit, in which the curator is defining a parcours throughout the exhibition space, and the visitor is following it to view the exhibition. Here, the avatars of the artworks are moving around. You have to catch them. So it's a completely different way, completely different approach to looking at an exhibition and being part of an exhibition. We also developed a guided tour option for this, a guided tour feature. This reddish fellow is our guide avatar, and it can point with its nose to an artwork it would like to show to the visitors who also have avatars. So in the end, in this online exhibition space, quite a few avatars are crawling around the visitors, the artworks themselves, and also a guide if a guided tour is taking place. And also a stage is included here where screenings and other program, so the activation of the online space can take place. Oops. Just a moment. Yeah. Also, a book was created and published along this exhibition, which included an augmented reality app that was an image marker based, or is still an image marker based app with digital illustrations to chosen artworks from the exhibition. We also try to elaborate this hybridization of a museum throughout conference, the Hybrid Museum Experience Symposium, which featured speakers like Christiane Paul, Boris Groys, or Tanya Aedo, and many more. You can look them up in the video archive, and there's also a conference proceeding that has been published as a PDF online and can be downloaded from the Beyond Matter website. And then we arrive to this quite peculiar part of the project. It's actually something that is quite unprecedented. Well, I think at least, and in the last few years, I haven't found similar approaches. I did find, but completely the same idea was maybe not yet implemented, in the sense of creating digital models of exhibitions, of past exhibitions that are not physically accessible anymore, just their documentation. And these digital models are not digital twins. So the idea was not to recreate the past exhibition space and the past scenography with photographical representation of the works and the entire environment itself, but to sort of emulate these exhibitions, their concepts, and the pieces, the exhibits that were included in both of them. And this is how it looks like currently. So the exhibition Iconoclash, which took place in 2002 at the ZKM, was a show about iconoclasm, different forms of iconoclasm. Iconoclasm in the arts, in sciences, and also in religion. And I would also add that politics played an important role in this whole constellation as well. It was a very complex interdisciplinary exhibition with more than 400 pieces, more than 400 exhibits in around 3,000 square meter exhibition space. And it was the work of two main curators, Bruno Latour and Peter Weibel, and an entire curatorial team who are art historians, science historians, different scientists who came together under this umbrella, let's say, and all of them created and curated their own cells, their own parts, and this is how the exhibition came together. As a reaction to this, we created an online platform in which these artworks, or like at least most of them, can be visited via their three-dimensional models. But you might guess it already, there is no surrounding architecture. So we erased the surrounding architecture to emphasize the artworks more, and also to give a certain dynamism to the exhibition space itself. Maybe I will jump through this. The method to reach this point, so like we try to create experiential models of these exhibitions, and to be able to decide what the best model for a particular exhibition would be. We interviewed artists, curators, and also the architect of the exhibition. And in this case, after the discussion with specifically with the architect Manfred Wolf-Proteg, we came to the conclusion that actually he always wanted to do a dynamic scenography, even at the time when he was asked to create the scenography for Iconoclash, for the static physical exhibition. And digital model of his show is an organic development of his idea, in which again the artworks are moving around, but they are moving around on an algorithmic basis, which we called gravity-based reshuffling, since the artworks are getting closer to the visitor when the visitor is looking at a certain specific artwork. I mean, when a visitor is looking at a specific artwork with certain tags with related to certain topics, then the other artworks that are related to the same topics are coming closer, and the ones which are dissimilar are drifting apart. So this is the kind of system which is constantly recreating the scenography, the digital scenography, and following the visitor, and so the constant recreation is more and more personalized as the visitor is building up its profile, its digital profile throughout the visit. The exhibition didn't only take place within the walls of the ZKM, within the walls of the museum, but there was a sculptural performance outside of the ZKM. And in 2002, this performance, this sculpture performance actually happened. There was a crane, and there was a Lenin sculpture dangling from it. This is something that that we could recreate as an augmented reality installation, and each and every time the model of the exhibition is being displayed in a museum, this additional feature, so to say. So this augmented reality sculpture can be well, sort of exhibited. So, I mean, the museum itself has to draw attention to its existence. And just very briefly about the other one, it's another model of another exhibition curated by Thierry Chaput and Jean-François Lyotin in 1985 at the Centre Pompidou in Paris. It was, or it became a legendary exhibition throughout the last more than 30 years. In this case, since we don't know much, we don't know how the artworks were exactly distributed in this space. It was not documented. The exhibition was not documented well enough to create a digital twin at all. But as I said, it wasn't the purpose of this whole experiment either. So the designers created and opted for such a black and white ghosty environment in which the visitor can walk through. Navigation is not really easy, but it's sort of on purpose, since the curator of the original exhibition wanted to create and did create a labyrinth in the space of the Centre Pompidou in '85. This online exhibition model is includes many layers of archival material that can be also visited through the different flat layers that are being added to the three-dimensional walkable model. So practically, these are the current models we are working on, and maybe this is the most interesting part of the project. There are a few more things. So like this is how it looks like in an exhibition space. That's a beta version of the so-called immaterial display, which is being created for presenting exhibitions in the museum environment, so digital exhibition models in the museum environment. And so here is a list of the exhibitions. This is even the before the beta version and discussions around it. And again, another version of the same thing. And this is already our residency program. So thank you so much for the attention. And I think I would leave it with this, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thanks so much, Lívia. That was really amazing. I'm super curious about the material display, but we'll have more time to talk about it later. We'll pass on to Robin. And as we mentioned before, it will be more of a conversational presentation. And I'll start with the basics. Robin, can you tell us a little bit more about what is the Museum of Other Realities?
Yeah, so I mean, a really great place to go and check out the museum is museumor.com. I'm just going to put that in the comments in case anybody wants to go there. But essentially, it's a virtual reality museum that's networked and available online to anyone with a headset. So you can travel there from anywhere, and you can see a collection of art and artworks from artists all over the world. And we've been working on it since around 2016. It originally started as we were thinking of more of a magazine format where we would package 4 or 5 small experiences all together, and then we would release it quarterly. And one of the things that we did kind of on a whim was we included multiplayer. A colleague of ours, Max Weisel, has a company called Normal, and it does multiplayer networking. So the first issue that we released, we decided let's put in some multiplayer, and then we realized that these experiences, they were just doors, and it was this big white room. So we figured maybe we could put a few pieces of artwork that we and our friends are working on into the space to kind of fill it out a little bit and have something to stand around before you go in and out. And it turned out that by putting together that networking and even those simple artworks, people were more interested in standing in the lobby or as interested in standing in the lobby and talking as they were in actually going into the experiences themselves. So we kind of leaned into that, and we started doing these shows, every month or two for years, and just kind of gathering, snowballing more and more artists and building a community. And eventually a large company, HCC, approached us and they said, would you like to take this to the next level? We ended up doing a round of venture funding with them. And then we were really able to kind of go ahead with pursuing just building a giant museum full of incredible art. So we did that for 2 more years until the pandemic rolled around. And then once the pandemic happened, a lot of the people we'd been working with were associated with a variety of festivals or exhibitions that were suddenly canceled. And they were looking for a space or a way to still do those shows. So we ended up hosting, the first one we did was a small festival out of Germany, Bram, very cool. And then we did Cannes, Tribeca, New Images. We did the Vancouver Immersive a couple times. So it was kind of just nonstop shows, which was interesting because we kind of came back around to that wrapper idea that we had originally thought we were going to do, that sort of magazine, except these magazines had all of the experiences from the immersive selection of Cannes, for example. And some of the projects were pretty intense. We had, one of them had like 36 different groups and hundreds of stakeholders, like 2 months to make it happen. So there was a really interesting challenge to kind of adapt what was intended to be a physical exhibition into a digital space, tie it together with networking, make sure everything worked pretty well in a short period of time. And so that really stretched our capabilities and helped us build some interesting muscles in terms of how we're able to adapt works designed for one format into another format in a reasonably short period of time. And then over the last, I would say, year, we've kind of come back around to what we did originally, which was working with individual artists. And we're going to kind of, I think, we'll probably still do a few festivals, but we're looking to transition out of that and into, again, working with individuals, just taking the time to go, one-to-one with a creator and figure out how best to express their work in a digital space. I really enjoy that sort of collaboration, and I think that we both learn a lot. And that kind of brings us to where we are today.
Awesome. Super interesting. I thought there was some specific challenges behind creating the museum as a social space, but it seems that it's something that happened quite organically and maybe was very important to driving those initial experiences more, right?
Yeah, actually, this kind of relates to, we have a question from the audience that I might just tie into this. So the networking, working with Max and Normal has been great. They're a great company, and they've done a pretty fantastic job of seamless networking. Something that I found maybe more challenging than, say, the technical aspect of the implementation would be deciding what elements of the artworks we would network and what elements we wouldn't, how to make something. We have one piece that's done on a GPU, so it requires many millions of computations per second, and it's not possible to network it. So we had to find a way to kind of meet in the middle with what we were networking. And what we ended up doing is we only network everybody's hands. We don't network the simulation itself. So everyone's seeing a slightly different ball of undulating particles, but they're all looking in the same place because it gets pulled back into the middle. So yeah, that's a really interesting challenge. And then this question from Caroline, why transition out of festival exhibition? We find it really challenging when we do a festival, there's a huge number of stakeholders. The period of time that we have to put it together is very short, and we often don't have the time we need to work with each individual creator. When we did one festival, it was Cannes, Tribeca, and New Images all together. We had 3 wings, so many different creators, like 40. And sometimes one of those creators really wants to push the capabilities of what they're trying to do, but we had to put this whole thing together in 6 weeks. So it ended up me kind of, killing everyone's babies in terms of what they wanted to do and saying, I'm really sorry, but like we have this very specific deliverable that you have to give to us. And then we get like one revision to get it looking the way that you want. And that's a hard thing to do for me in terms of, it's really difficult to, you can do something beautiful. We did a pretty good job, I think, with those festivals and those exhibitions, and I'm proud of what we did, but it was really hard I really want to go deeper with each of those creators. These are world-renowned creators. They're in these world-renowned festivals, and it just felt like, giving them a spec, doing one revision on what they send us just wasn't enough time. And I think that there's other platforms that might be better suited to that sort of festival exhibition. They're more self-serve, and they don't lend themselves as much to a high touch, one-on-one with a creator over time. So yeah, that's kind of why we're going the way we're going there.
Interesting. And could you talk a little bit more about the curatorial processes behind all these different stages in the museum's life?
Yes.
The initial magazine format, the partnership with the festivals, and also what you're planning on doing from now on.
So the initial magazine format was very informal. We distributed the whole executable as just like a Dropbox file that people would pull the exe off a Dropbox, they'd fire it up, and the networking, everything would just run. And like everybody was just a box. Your head was a box, your hands were boxes. And we kind of just pulled what we thought was cool, or worked with our community. We have a really fantastic community of artists that we get the chance to work with, and they have friends who are artists, and that's kind of how we proliferate that work. And then we've also worked a little bit with curators who have, effectively a collection of artists. We're working with one really talented curator right now, Samuel Arsenault-Brassard. He lives in Montreal, and we're going to put together an exhibition of artists that he admires. And that's really great because he kind of has this vision, and then we're able to craft that into a pretty, I think what's going to be a pretty cool show coming this fall. And then working with the festivals, obviously the curation was entirely in their hands. We dealt more with how we can adapt each of those projects into the museum. And then going back to the model we're going to try and sort of be working with now, that sort of model with people like Sam or with individuals, it'll be going back a little bit to the old methods that we had, but I'd like to work a little bit more closely with more curators, because I think there's a lot of people with really fantastic viewpoints out there in the world, and I'd like to see all of them, and not just what I think is cool or what my friends think is cool. I kind of want to we would like to spread our wings a little bit. So I think that would be a very cool model, and we're looking to get into that more.
And this kind of asks the question also, how much these future exhibitions will affect the very architecture of the museum, because you have a quite striking building more, and in a way it's very pliable as well. It's very transformable. Do curatorial projects from now on will play more with the structures of the museum, or is that something that you want to keep stable for any specific reasons?
No, I really like being able to play with the architecture of the space and play with the laws of physics. And if we want to walk on the wall or the roof or float through the air for an exhibition, we can certainly do that if it enhances the work. But I do like the idea that the museum is finite. I think I don't know exactly who it was who talked about like the horizon of possibility. And I'm very sorry, I'm sure there's lots of academics who are listening who are like, I know who that guy was. But it's just this idea that when everything is accessible, it also homogenizes everything a little bit. So I like to keep the way that we navigate the museum kind of maybe even sometimes a little bit frustratingly finite. And also the floor plan of the museum kind of needs to be limited in that way, because once you can go anywhere, it might be that nowhere really has any special significance. So it's a bit of a balancing act between maintaining our collection and also showing new works. It was easy to do with the festivals because they had limited run times. So we would just open up a wing and then it would disappear. You can actually go in right now and see what we did for Tribeca. We got to work with a fantastic artist who made a whole venue and we just plugged it into the museum. Right now it's still in there. It's empty. It's a beautiful piece of artwork though. So I really like it. We left it up for a little bit. But I'm thinking, it's really looking forward to how we can play with that architecture. But again, keeping it limited, maybe frustratingly so at times.
Which leads to my other question, which is about your collection and how you are archiving the experiences and all the projects that have been shown on MORE. And are they going to be accessible in any way in the future? Are the previous versions of the museum going to be accessible in any way in the future?
Man, I mean, I would love so much to be able to show everything that we've ever showed forever. But, you know, certainly with the festivals, those licenses are finite, unfortunately. And then even with the artworks, the licenses, the periods that the artists may want the piece to be shown for can be limited. And we're also limited by the amount of floor space. So yeah, we're always looking for a sort of a way of being able to see anything we've ever shown, so long as we still have the license to do so, while not having an absolutely sprawling, you know, endless catacombs. It was actually quite interesting, Lívia, listening to your presentation when you spoke about was it gravitational sorting? Sounds like an interesting way of surfacing different pieces over time. So that's something we're always working on. And I'm hoping we get better at it as time goes on, because it is really cool. We actually did an exhibition talking about archival and archiving old digital artworks, and it can be quite challenging. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there to explore that and to do it better.
So you're not planning to do catalogs, for example, or other forms of similar documentation?
It would be cool. But I mean, so the thing about the museum is it's always been a virtual reality art gallery. And we try really hard to keep, though it may be tempting to create, say, a book with all of the artworks we've ever shown, you know, one on each page. I feel that that's not truly the spirit in which they were intended to be exhibited, which I'm sure there's plenty of justification for just showing some record of what it was. But if we were to do a catalog, I would really want to do it in a way that utilized the resources of spatial computing and utilized XR. So while that is kind of an ongoing pet project, we don't have a book per se. We have a website. The website has all of the artists we show, and I think even maybe a list of their works, but we don't have too many kind of, like, we don't really have a visual catalog of pieces per se.
Yeah, it's interesting, or maybe challenging, to think about the ways in which future historians and researchers might be able to access these new forms of expression in virtual reality or other forms of immersive environment as well.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really challenging, to be honest.
Perhaps my final question has to do with everything that goes behind the scenes in MORE. You briefly spoke about it when you talked about the partnerships with festivals, the VC funding, and all the other collaborations. But can you perhaps walk us through a little bit more how the day-to-day activities at MORE work behind the scenes?
Well, it really depends on what we're doing, but I think most of our time we are fortunate to be working with extremely talented creative people and just figuring out the logistics of getting their material into our space in the way that they want and in the way that an audience can best engage with. And that's pretty much what we focus on most of the time, to be honest. And there's everything around that, letting people know, letting our audience know what's coming, doing our best to document some of the work that we've done. I would say that's our day-to-day. And every now and again, fighting fires. as is the case with software development. I think it's always a necessity.
Interesting. So you see it more in the realm of software development than really in the realm of museums, in the sense that the ecology that you are connected to right now is not really, for example, I don't know, heritage and Canada Art Council, but more networks of new media production and this kind of collaborators.
I don't think that's necessarily true. We've been very fortunate to work with some prominent Canadian organizations. We actually recently did something, the Canadian Collection, which had a collection of some of the finest art from virtual reality creators in Canada. And that was fantastic. And I think that maybe that's more of what I do, as liaising with the human elements of those organizations. But a pretty significant hurdle, I think, a lot of the time to showing this work is in that sort of implementation, not necessarily the how of it, but maybe even just like the what exactly you're showing, what you want to show. Those are interesting questions. And we spend a lot of time working with stakeholders to define what exactly we're trying to do, and then to do it as best we can.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much, Robin. I think that we have already so many questions in the chat for both of you, and maybe we could open the floor to everyone in the audience. People, if anyone wants to ask your questions out loud, please be invited to do so right now. Just raise your hand. Otherwise, I can read the questions. And so maybe I'll do it. The first question was from René to Lívia, and he was asking how complicated and expensive was to create this exhibition. And I think that he was referring specifically to Spatial Affairs, the virtual one.
Yes, well, that was a rather small project, actually. So we worked together with the designers who used an open source game engine to create this online environment, and they designed the online environment, and this is how it came about. So we had quite a few conceptual meetings, but then it was a pretty easy and pretty fast production, especially in comparison with these historical mammoths, the Iconoclash and Immaterial.
And now to Robin. Rodrigo asks, the approach of the artists design their own space in more is very interesting. Have you done physical exhibitions, for example, providing space and equipment, headsets in a public space? You're mute.
Apologies, I muted myself. Yeah, we've looked at doing that in a variety of ways. We tend to do it through partners. Physical exhibition just really isn't our strength. We looked at sort of a new branch of More that was going to do a lot more physical exhibition, but that deal's been put on hold given the state of the world and the economy right now, as I'm sure many of you are aware. But yeah, it's something we really like to do with partners. We've done a lot of partnering with, again, festivals are really great at that. We tend to let them do their thing. We just let the More be the engine that it all runs on. But yeah, I think that particularly projection mapping, sensing, those are very powerful tools to get anyone into an immersive space. Not everyone wants to put on a headset, not everyone can. Not everyone has the same physical capabilities as, you know, somebody who might enjoy an immersive experience. So I think that bringing it to them in a different format can be really powerful. And it's certainly something we're looking at.
Speaking of which, maybe that was my biggest question, or one of the biggest questions I had for Lívia. It's about the Immaterial Display and what went behind designing it, because it's an alternative interface to immersive and interactive exhibitions, and it looks very impressive in a way. And I can see some of the reasons why it's so useful as well. But it would be great to hear you speak a little bit more about it, Lívia.
Well, it's a long process and it's still an ongoing process. So developing hardware is harder than I ever expected, to be honest. So we started to work together with designers after an open competition 2 years ago, and they came up with the idea. Then we started a discussion on how to make this idea usable in a museum environment, and we tried to adapt it to cases that we know from our practice in the different museums that were participating. And also we try to adapt this to a more inclusive use that, for example, visitors in wheelchair could, so how can they use it? And then we try to think through scenarios of different visits. By the end of this process, we arrived to a point of a great plan, which just had to be implemented. But obviously, hardware is not always doing what you imagine it was going to do. It's the same with software, probably. But I think that the materials, palpable materials, are specifically notorious. And so in the end, after a few trial and error rounds and iterations, we more or less arrived to a point in which we have a quite interesting new way of visiting those exhibition models, because the actual chair you are sitting on is reacting to your movement. So it's rotating, the exhibition space is rotating together with you when you are rotating in the chair. And unfortunately, back and forward movement was not possible to create with the chair movement. We tried it, and therefore we added a handheld handheld controller. And oh, I'm sorry, the phone. Just a moment.
I don't know if Leah had a question for Lívia and wants to wait for her to come back.
Yes, it was both. I can wait a bit, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, I have another question for Robin, which relates to these new 3D forms that are virtual reality adjacent, but not necessarily virtual reality, such as drawings made with tilt brush and quill. And there is a place for them at More. And I was just wondering, how do you see these scenes and these other kind of minor art forms, if that's a reasonable way to call them? And yeah.
I think it's certainly a form of artistic expression in its own right, right up there with any other. And we certainly enjoy showing them. You can actually have a lot of flexibility in a virtual environment. You're able to, say, teleport down into a diorama and can become very tiny and explore it at a 1-to-1 scale. Or you can float around. We have one piece in the museum. It's the largest piece we show. You go through a huge portal, and it's actually 11 kilometers in diameter. And it's an abstract piece painted in tilt brush, and you navigate it by effectively flying through space. And I think that's it's a fantastic form of expression that I really enjoy.
No, it's amazing how, again, it's great to find institutional space for this kind of formats that sometimes they are just overlooked by not only researchers but also other institutions. But moving on, Leah, sorry.
Yeah, hi everyone. It's not really a fair question because I just spent like a month and a half at ZKM researching Beyond Matter. Hi, Lívia. So I've had time to elaborate certain questions, but I think it'll be an interesting point to relate what Robin was talking about previously and on his project. And for one thing, I have this background also in game production, game industry, and software production. So from that point of view, when we're creating this kind of let's say participatory interactive platforms nowadays, especially, we have this big issue with complying with the GDPR, right? The General Data Protection Regulation. And I don't see that much in platforms and virtual reality platforms for exhibitions. So I wanted to ask both of you if that was at all in discussion at some point. I think especially Lívia with Iconoclash, the platform created now, I think there was some kind of like tracing of the visitors' steps throughout the exhibition. And I think on the other one, on the other exhibition, I think there was a chat, like you said, there was a chat, for example. So these let's say features in maybe a software production or a game industry, they would need to comply to some kind of GDPR and data consent and so on. So I was wondering if this comes into the discussion when thinking about these platforms.
Yeah, obviously. So being a public institution, we do need to deal with this, and this has to be thought of in case of any project that we realize. So in case of these two exhibitions, like in Spatial Affairs Wording, there's a obviously a cookie banner that pops up when you visit the site, and that includes also the ways these what happens with the chat, what happens with the data you leave behind, and in the other case, the visitors are traced throughout their visit, so their movements, their choices, and this and that. But it's a session-based tracking, so it's all gone when the session is over, and this is why it can be solved with a simple cookie banner. That's it.
Thanks for the answer.
Robin, if you want to comment on that as well, but in any way, Rodrigo and I think that Caroline also raised their hand. I don't know if she still has a question, but anyway, sorry, Robin.
Yeah, I can go into a little bit of detail. I mean, I think sadly, the way sadly, not sadly, I don't know. The way that we deal with GDPR is by just not collecting any data. There's a lot of interesting things you can do with visitor traffic, and there's ways of anonymizing it, but handling data, especially for a small organization, can be a challenge, I think, just because there's a lot of regulation all around the world into how it's handled. You're supposed to have a chief data officer, which I think a lot of organizations can't accommodate. And yeah, so what it does for us effectively is reduces our capabilities. But I mean, you have to weigh that against the benefits of legislation like that. And I think it's important to have things like GDPR and the like. So yeah, I think it's a balance, and we're always looking at ways we can do more with visitor data to create collaborative artworks. But yeah, I think that if we're careful not to step on those sorts of those rights and regulations.
Thanks, Robin.
Rodrigo?
Hi, can you hear me? My question is for Lívia now. watching our presentation, I noticed that the Immaterial exhibition was played with a gamepad, and I was wondering how the public approaches that kind of interface, because I think the digital exhibitions, digital museums have a lot in common with the language of game design, the level design, visual cues of the public, but the public of art exhibition is not always the same public of games. So I was wondering if you have any feedback on that question. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Actually, we don't have a lot of feedback yet because only beta versions were exhibited until now. So the model is not done yet, and it will go online on the 2nd of December. Save the date, and then we will see. But I'm already preparing myself for kind of yeah, sort of problems, I would say, because especially the model of the exhibition you mentioned, Les Immatériaux, is a little bit on purpose, not so easy to navigate. It's a bit like an online game, but it's a bit like an online game that is that tries to make your life less easier than it was before. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Oh, perfect. Again, I don't know if Caroline wants to answer questions or if there's any other question in the audience right now. Otherwise, I would be super curious to know more about the next stages in both museums, in both projects. Whatever you can share with us about the next months in the Museum of Other Realities and in Beyond Matter would be amazing to know.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, as I said, we're just looking at how we can work on projects more in depth, more time going back and forth with creators, and it looks like that's going to be working with more individual creators. I'm also actually quite interested in NFTs and how we can use NFTs to remunerate curators and creators each time their work is changes hands, or if the more provides a platform for them, can provide value for them in terms of how they present that stuff. But I think more than anything, we're just going to continue looking at ways to provide the best platform that we can for creators to put their best foot forward with their work, and to a global audience.
Thanks. Lívia?
Well, as I mentioned, on the 2nd of December, these exhibition models go online. And parallel to this, we are opening an exhibition, which is probably, it's a physical exhibition, so it's quite far for all of you, but it will be at the Zentrum, at the Center for Art and Media in Karlsruhe in Germany. And for next year, we are planning to close down or to summarize the entire project with a publication. And that should be accessible by summer 2023.
Perfect. Any final remarks or questions from the panel or from the audience? Otherwise, it was really a pleasure to have you here, Lívia and Robin. Again, a great way to wrap up this stage of Museum Without Walls. Very soon, the recording will be on our YouTube channel. So if you want to tell your friends, tell your friends. All the panels are there actually, and in October, we'll be also uploading the talks that we had at the conference here in Kingston. And yeah, I hope to see you all around, online, offline, sometime in the future. And yeah, once again, have a nice week and thanks so much for your presence.
Thanks, Gabriel. Thanks, Lívia.
Thanks a lot for both of you.